Welcome to the Public Nonprofit Funding Forum, felicitated by Mike Dunlop from the Ministry of Northern Development and Mines-NCIR program. Please welcome the forum panel, Bruce Strapp, Executive Director of the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund, and Mike Belliveau of FedNor. The focus of this forum is to create awareness of funding to assist communities, nonprofit organizations, and First Nations. Bienvenue au Forum sur le financement public à but non lucratif qui sera animé par Mike Dunlop du programme NCIR du ministère du Développement du Nord et des Mines. S'il vous plaît, veuillez accueillir pour ce forum Bruce Strapp, directeur général des Fonds du patrimoine du Nord de l'Ontario, et Mike Belliveau du FedNor. Le but principal de ce forum est de sensibiliser le public au financement qui permettra d'aider les communautés, les organisations à but non lucratif et les Premières Nations.
Sorry, too loud. Good afternoon, everybody. We have three speakers here today that are going to take somewhere around 10 minutes each. And if I could ask you to hold your questions, we'll go through the three presentations, and then we'll make time for questions at the end of the presentations. To start, I'd like to ask Bruce Strapp to come up from the NOHFC.
Thanks, Mike. I'm back again. So I just wanted to reiterate, I was telling Mayor Renaud that we had a special on for Greenstone at NOHFC. So for the next couple of weeks, all free money, no equity required. So just bring me some projects. But I do have to comment. I'm very impressed with this event. This is the first time event. I knew it was on last year. So Greenstone has been a very creative partner with us, and certainly we share a common concern in helping build the economy there, but also it's going to have a very significant regional impact there. So I know working with your team and with yourself, Mayor, it's been an honor. We just had the opportunity to host the NOHFC board there. The hospitality was awesome. Certainly from my point of view, it was cold all over Ontario, so it was fine, but it was a very warm place to be for the hospitality, so we certainly thank you on that. As I mentioned in my earlier panel, I was really focused on the private sector programs, and as you know, we do have public and nonprofit. So I'm going to kind of focus on the other thing, but I'm not going to repeat the slides this morning. I think many of you know that we're kind of partnered in regards to the strategy for the growth plan. And these are the kind of the key elements in the growth plan that the NOHFC board has embraced. Certainly, I want to remind, these are the kind of the sectors that we want to really grow. For many of you in the economic development game, helping look at diversification within your community, looking at projects that will increase the GDP, the gross domestic product, or looking at driving new investment from outside, new sales and everything, that only spins off into benefits to the community. So just regurgitating the wealth inside the communities sometimes doesn't give you the diversity that you want. So these were the 5 programs I mentioned this morning. I'm going to speak a little bit about the public sector ones, the strategic economic infrastructure, community capacity building, and reiterate the internship program at the end. So this one is probably one of the most popular programs that we have seen across Northern Ontario. It's probably one of the programs. It does continue on with the legacy of the infrastructure, the community infrastructure and community development program from the previous programs. And this has been made available for communities to help build that those infrastructure requirements to help support economic development in the communities. Just recently in Greenstone, we helped, along with our FedNor colleagues, $1.75 million each into about a $6 million project to support the capital infrastructure to help with a training center that would help with their labor force, not only in Greenstone, but in many of the First Nations communities. So that'll be a fairly significant boom, not only in the jobs that'll be created in that center, but it'll also move many of the individuals who might not be able to get a job into career paths that'll fit with those sectors. And there's a brochure in your package there, I noticed, in regards to some of the training that they'll be able to do. This has been typically the go-to program for municipalities for infrastructure, industrial parks, waterfront developments, downtown developments. There's nothing like looking at this program if you're looking to try to remotivate your commercial activities in the downtown, or you may have some new components, new commercial industrial coming into your community. They do need some infrastructure, or they need some support in regards to getting up. This is the program that we kind of support. Certainly in regards to being creative on this side to work with municipalities, we've done quite a few things. A lot of the post-secondary education organizations come to us on this program in regards to building out their tech centers. So we're looking at building capacity in regards to advanced manufacturing, looking at everything from 3D printers to robotics and everything. And certainly in this community, Confederation and Canada Sioux College, some of these colleges have really been aggressive in building out their technology centers, working with industry in regards to that technology. And of course, those students benefit in regards to coming out with the advanced skills. The other program that we also can do with this one is business attraction and business growth. So communities have started to move forward, and I know Greenstone's working on a business retention attraction program where communities can work with existing businesses in creating an environment to attract and infill, so input replacement. And so we've done a lot of those projects across Northern Ontario as well. The next one is the Northern Community Capacity Building Program. This one's got two elements. So carrying on the tradition of the Community Development Program, we can help do economic development strategies. We can help with expanding the capacity of an organization with an economic development group to maybe take on additional projects. In the past, we have worked with First Nations on mining sector developments in regards to looking at the types of businesses they may want to move into and create themselves. But it's also a pre-platform for those municipalities to be able to do some of the research and pulling together a project that may lead to the infrastructure project. So this program has been pretty proactive. Certainly one of the things that we see with the nonprofit First Nations and the communities, and we stress this, is do your front-end work using this program to really kind of give you the priorities of where you want to go, and then we can start helping with those priorities. And as you move forward with the infrastructure program to help support them, it'll lead to the private sector programs to help entice the private sector or the entrepreneurs to come forward. The other program, basically, we used to get involved in the previous program on fairly significant tourism events in the community. So if you were looking at a brand new event that was coming to your community, we could help with the infrastructure around maybe a recreational facility or something to be able to help bring that event that would attract tourists. So we can go up to $100,000 on strategic infrastructure to help support that tournament. And that's kind of the big component on the program. The other one is if you have smaller events, and it could be an event such as this one, or an economic development event, or a small business planning forum, whether it's regional, local, or whatever. We have a small events program that can help offset some of the costs up to 30%, up to $15,000 in a grant to help facilitate those events in your community or within the region. So, and that program, we can turn it around fairly quickly because we can prove those at the committee level. But the whole purpose of that particular program, it helps drive out new clients, new opportunities that ultimately can come to some of the other programs, whether it's the entrepreneurship program or the business expansion program. So many times when we do the reach out to these types of events, it does garner and lead us to new business opportunities and new applications that we're looking for. On the Northern Innovation Program, this program, we support the nonprofits and the universities and colleges in regards to this program. We are encouraging, though, that the applicant should be led by the private sector, and then they could partner with the nonprofits and private players. So this one really has kind of got a private sector focused, but we have a lot of the communities, a lot of the innovation centers who are piggybacking on their private sector applicants to really participate in this program. So we're really trying to move our innovation over into the private sector to be successful on creating those types of projects that will resonate. Certainly for universities, the industrial research chairs, we're continuing that momentum on that, and it's certainly creating some new thinking in regards to the technologies or the business models for the future, whether it's our mining, forestry, there's some workplace employment things that are being created, and we're looking at some new sectors in regards to that research that will lead to more opportunities. And this is a program I talked about this morning, but also for the internship program, and I talked about this morning. The only thing for public sector, for nonprofits, municipalities, and First Nations, this program is up to 90%. Funding, 10% comes from the partner, so the business is 50%. But this program is to help young people or people who have recently graduated from university or college with a degree diploma within the last 3 years. There's no age restrictions. Certainly we've seen a lot of the workforce go back. A lot of our clients talk to us about trying to find young people. They're far and few between, and sometimes the small rural communities or the far north communities. And so we've opened up the door for adults who've gone back for post-secondary education, and that should hopefully help with recruitment process for those areas where it's very difficult. The other thing too is that you don't have to be Northern Ontario. It could be from wherever, so it could be attracting talent from some of the southern or other institutions that would be eligible. So it's still very much focused on creating a good work experience for the candidates. Certainly municipalities and First Nations and nonprofits have used this program extensively, and it's probably the number of applications we receive it is equal to all the other applications put together. So we do affect about 700 or 800 and create about 700 or 800 interns every year with our partners. So very successful program. This is just a bit of the process, so I do want to make sure that we kind of share with the clients our expectations, and just to manage that we don't make decisions overnight. There is a process, a stage 1 and a stage 2 application process. So stage 1 helps you get on the radar screen, and we determine eligibility so that you're not spinning your wheels on doing a lot of work and then getting a decline because you don't fit with their mandate. And then a second stage after eligibility has been found. Stage 2 is a business plan, full project plan. That goes to due diligence, and that gets recommended up to committee, and the committee makes the recommendation to the board. So usually on a project we see a turnaround from, say, the application, first stage right through to a board decision could be about 3 to 4 months, just with the queue and the volume of applications that we get in. So with the new program launch, we have more applications than we have money. We have $100 million a year to invest. That's an investment. I do advocate to a lot of players it's an investment that you have to earn. So there is a bit of a competitive process with applications coming into the queue. And so we're really looking at things that will work, that'll get off the ground within 6 months. And if you're having a really hard time and can't raise the rest of your equity or money, we'll ask to rescind until you can rescind the money or the commitment until you can raise the capital, because we need that money working in Northern Ontario quickly. So, and finally, just some contact information. My website, thenohfc.com, very robust. It's got all the programs on it in detail, so it gets into the eligibility stuff. And also it's got an online application that you can download and then flip and electronically send to us by email. Certainly there's a very good contact group out there. You had the opportunity to listen to Noel on the trade and investment, but we also have the Ministry of Northern Development staff in the area teams and in some of the regional offices throughout Northern Ontario. Those from from Greenstone, Nogilin. She's very easily accessible in regards to advice, and they can do pre-consult on our applications just to make sure we can be helpful. So the network within the ministry is pretty strong, and certainly we partner with our other funding partners, both FedNor and OMAFRA and some of the others, in regards to making sure we can bring the best strategy, the best funding formula to those communities to enhance their project. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Our next speaker will be Mike Belliveau from FedNor.
What he said. Actually, we do an awful lot of work in partnership with our colleagues at NOHFC. Both of us have people on the ground across Northern Ontario. Don't think we've had a single instance where we've had a problem with being able to interface and build on each other's strengths in support of community initiatives. Probably the single biggest message that I would offer is that beyond the specifics of program funding, and I'll get to that momentarily, recognize us as a resource. We have a significant amount of experience between our two teams. We work in a collaborative context. We're looking for collaboration on the ground, an openness to best practices and opportunities to expand, improve, create better outcomes type thing in the context of what a project may look like at the beginning to what it looks like at the end. So it's a work in progress, which we are prepared to basically be part of the support facilitation and planning, if you will, not just an application and response. So, you know, it's an important differentiation, in my opinion, to those on the ground who are working in communities to recognize that we're a resource, and we're a resource with a big reach. In both cases, Bruce's organization has all the ministries of the province of Ontario that it can call on in situations where more or better information may be necessary. And of course, we do the same with the feds across the country. So including, and one of the things that I'd offer as an example of that, our colleagues in the Industrial Research Assistance Program. I saw my colleague Paul Toulanen out on the trade floor show. They have a network of 330 technical advisors across the country, and you can't find a sector where they don't have an expert, not a specialist, an expert. So in essence, we can ask about a specific thing across a different network of people and get you either the right information or direct it towards the right information to get you out of the first quadrant where you don't know where you don't know, which is oftentimes a very good starting point on gathering information about what you want to do and where you want to go. So one other comment that I'll make, and I'll say this because I've been around long enough to be able to say it, seeing a very healthy progression in regional thinking vis-a-vis localized community thinking. And the importance of that I don't think should be lost on any of us. We're not all going to get one of. We're not going to have a center of excellence in mining each. We're not going to have basically a lot of the things that in essence you'd like to have. It's a nice to have, but when it gets down to it, cost benefit type thing, it's not going to happen in every community. So it's how do we work together to get whatever the necessary resources are put in the proper position to have the most effective outcome. So that really calls for more regional strategies than it does localized strategies. It doesn't mean that on the ground you're not looking to improve your economy and improve the impact of the things that happen in your community. But in cases where things are happening and you're not getting traction, in a lot of cases it's because in essence just the business case for it may be a little bit much of a reach. So that's just an observation. Most of what I talked about this morning basically applies here, so I'm going to skip through a few slides and get to just a couple of the core ones that relate more to our public and not-for-profit sector. We do the same stuff just with a slightly different target. We do it with communities and not-for-profit organizations, agencies, under two elements of the Northern Ontario Development Program. One's the community economic development piece. The other is the business growth and competitiveness piece. I touched this morning on some of the stuff that applied under the business growth and competitiveness, things like the Innovation Center here in Thunder Bay, Paro, work that we've done with SEMI as an example out of Sudbury, and again, use those resources. They're being supported to accomplish that for you. And a large number of other things. So some of those things are identified specifically on our website. So just wanted to let you know that those things in terms of the reach on the business growth are really there. Where are we at here? Can I get back to that slide with the 4 not-for-profit areas? So not-for-profit corporations or organizations, municipalities, francophone communities, and First Nations are basically who we are looking to work with in the CED and the business growth and competitiveness area. So one of the things that communities are constantly doing is monitoring what they have compared with what they need to either attract new business or support existing business to grow and create sustainable economic impact. So things like the municipal infrastructure and particularly targeted things like industrial parks and things that are there wouldn't, for example, be able to work with a municipality on a new housing development type thing, but even though the housing may be necessary for housing new workers, unfortunately wouldn't necessarily meet the test for what we would want to do. So the last one there, particularly taking advantage of opportunities for development, diversifying the key economic sectors. Northwestern Ontario particularly was very hard hit by the meltdown in the forest sector, and we do see some emerging growth possibilities there. Having said that, I think one of the messages that it really left communities with is the realization that being a one-industry town is hugely challenging, and in spite of the fact in case of adding mining, we're not really diversifying away from resource economy per se. You need more eggs in your basket type thing, and a lot of the supply chain stuff that was referenced by prior speakers in essence are opportunities. A good example of in essence getting there is a small town like Red Lake, who's seen in the past 5-6 years 8 new supply chain companies set up in their location. Now some of that may be because Red Lake's a little farther off the beaten track than Greenstone would be, but having said that, there's a rationale for what companies will look at for why they would set up an operation in your community. The opportunity that needs to be assessed is what does it take to attract a company to set up shop. So that's part of the applied learning awareness building, information gathering that goes with the early stage work that sets up an opportunity for a community to assess who would they attract and how would they go about that. Are they lacking particular essential services for that company, and what would it take to put those in place? So it's an exercise in research through to consideration of if there's a gap, what is the gap, how do you fill the gap that translates into a potential project. So. And that covers a whole spectrum of things. Seeing a strong interest, for example, in more current times in local food may apply in some of the things going forward, particularly, as I mentioned this morning, the ICT sector and the use of those tools that allow any company to locate anywhere. As long as they have access to high-speed internet, they're good to go. So part of that, again, is communities having a realization of what those realities are in order to attract, or in a lot of cases, attract back. I mean, every one of the communities in Northwestern Ontario experiences one singular thing that they all have in common, and that's basically the exodus of youth type thing. So if you want them to come back, they've got to have the basis on which they can earn a living while enjoying the life and lifestyle of living close to where they were born. And a lot of times that's high-speed internet is a critical piece of that kind of thing. So it sounds like it's a small piece, but there's lots of communities that have seen that as being part of their strategy and have moved on it as a consequence. So the challenge that we put out there for communities is to identify your priorities. We don't have quite the budget that NOHFC has. We try to do as much as we can with what we have. But in essence, in most cases, it's really an opportunity in communities' cases to, in essence, identify what are the priorities and do that in a very constructive process in order to know and have everyone pretty much on the same page in a community or regional setting that this is what you want to do and why. So again, you implement those and basically the regional collaborations I spoke to a little earlier. So we're looking to do these things in order to facilitate economic impacts. So those impacts basically are inclusive of improving municipal infrastructures that support business, having businesses take advantage of that to expand or grow or relocate to Northern Ontario. And the third prong of that, and we all know it, is basically the human capital to do it. So again, if you're not an attractive location to live, then you're not likely to be an attractive location for a company to want to be there either. So I'll pretty much leave it at that. We're basically here, this presentation in all of its 29 pages or whatever it is will be available through the conference website. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mike. And last, I'm going to speak a little bit. As you know, I'm the coordinator of a program for Northern Ontario known as the Northern Communities Investment Readiness Program. I'll speak about the program, some specifics about the program right at the end of my presentation, but I thought today it might be a little more useful to talk today about some of the projects that we actually do and why we do them, and maybe describe some of the terms that we always hear. We always hear the term investment readiness. Maybe I'm going to talk a little bit about maybe what investment readiness is, the benefits of it, and why we want to look at doing it. Just wait for my presentation to queue up there. And I will reiterate, both Bruce and Mike talked about regional cooperation, and this program is very big about regional cooperation at all. I would fully, a lot of projects we do, we work in cooperation with a number of communities and geographic areas to become stronger as a region than we are as an individual community. There we go. And I guess I've got control here. What is it, just the... Oh. Hey guys, which button was it here? Oh, there we go. Thank you. So first of all, we'll talk a little bit about what investment readiness is. You have to look at yourself, because that's virtually what we are as businesses when we're looking at site selectors or investors coming to our region or community. We have to understand what they're looking for, what types of information they need, and what the competitive process is, because it is a competitive process very often between communities sometimes looking for that same investment. Site selectors will very often be working for a company and have a set of parameters of where they're going to locate or where they're going to invest, and they will shortlist a number of communities and then compare that shortlist and make an investment decision. But in order to do that, they're going to need the information that they require to make the decision. And communities that don't have that information and understand the process of attracting investment will sometimes be on the non-competitive side of that issue. So the first thing we always look at, and you always hear this in Business 101, I guess, if you've ever been taking a course, is, you want to have knowledgeable professional points of contact for anybody that contacts your community. So if the phone rings, we need to have somebody that answers the phone, and whatever that number is you're giving out for your Economic Development Corporation or your department, It has to be staffed by someone that can answer questions quickly to the investors, or at the very least, put them in contact with somebody that does know who is going to make the decisions and move the investor along the process. You want to have up-to-date, and I'll underline up-to-date, comprehensive information on both your community and your region. And it has to be up-to-date, and up-to-date very often means 90 days in some cases. You want to make sure that's been updated on a regular basis. And more importantly, you want that information to be very quickly disseminated in sections. So I often had investors that say, you know, we asked for the commercial real estate database of a community, and we got a 700-page document that had everything from the best fishing holes and the tourism aspects. We really don't have time to go through the 700 pages. So you need to have it electronic and be able to send it very quickly. You want to have an investment attraction plan, a strategic plan on how you plan to move your community from where you are today to where you want to be as it regards investment attraction. And this should include a number of things. All your community assets, everything you have to offer an investor in your region or your community, what they may be interested in, because that's a lot of the times your competitive edge. Once you know these assets, it'll help you to identify target sectors that perhaps you should be looking to get an investment from. You don't want to do the shotgun effect of economic development. You want to be looking very specifically at a targeted sector that your assets support to get an investment from. Once you identify that sector, you also want to look at what existing barriers may still exist to you getting an investment from that sector. And you want to have a plan to leverage regional strengths on how to overcome some of those barriers. And more importantly, we have a lot of people in the room today, you want to determine what government and private assistance you can utilize in achieving those goals. Some of the benefits of, what are the benefits of investment readiness? Well, if you can get more diversification in your economy and get more activity going in your economic development portfolio in your community or region, there's a number of benefits that will accrue from that. Increased tax revenues, increased employment opportunities. Overlooked sometimes is the increased opportunities for existing businesses that already exist in your region, increased opportunities for new business startups, and again, improved diversification of the local economy. I know one of the speakers spoke before of having the one mill town, and if that one industry shuts down, we can be in trouble. But the more diversified we are, the better we can weather downturns in any specific area. Next is maybe something that we like to work on is a process. Very often I will get asked right off the bat, Mike, can we get a FAMT or a bunch of investors into our community? We want to talk to them as quickly as possible. That's always great, but the program over the couple years has actually had a 1- or 2-tier program. And before we get investors in your community, because you only get one chance perhaps sometimes to talk to those investors, you want to be sure that you're ready with the information and everything you need to deal with those investors. So we sort of developed a bit of a process in concert with many of the clients in this room over the years in the communities on how we walk down that road and what we do first and in what order. So some of the questions you want to ask yourself is, how do you determine what type of business you should be approaching? What type of information do you need? How do you involve all the stakeholders? This is very important. You have to get all the stakeholders in your community, 1, identified, and 2, on board whenever you're looking at attracting investment. And at what point should you develop a strategic plan? So some of the paths we've taken and the sort of the linear path we've worked on over the years in moving down that investment train is training. We'll go to a community first and we'll talk to the community and see if the economic development officers in that community need training. Do you have the skill sets necessary to deal with investors when they show up in your community? Do you understand what they're going to be asking you, and do you understand what the answers and where you get the information from? We look at some way of giving you a way of disseminating that information, whether it's a community profile that's on a government site, whether it's on a regional site, or whether it's on your own personal website for your community. The broader you can get your information and profiles out there, the better. Profiles are also very useful as a depository for your information as you move along. It's a living document. It has to be kept updated, but it's someplace you can very quickly grab that one piece of electronic information and fire it off quickly to an investor, so you don't have to send that 700-page package. Asset inventories, I mentioned a little earlier. These help you to direct resources to the appropriate sectors. So largely what an asset inventory is in my mind is we would come into the community, you would hire a consultant, and you would asset virtually everything you have in your community that may be of use to investors. And you got to think broadly in this, because something that you may not think is important may be to an investor. So you want to inventory everything that you have in your community. Generally, once we have these asset inventories done, we try to take those assets and combine them with some knowledge and a good consulting group, and try to identify one or two at the most, not more than that really, one or two sectors that would be the community or the region's best bet based on the assets that you have. There's really not much sense looking towards an industry and spending a lot of your economic development team's time chasing a sector if you don't have the assets to support that sector. So you want to focus very strategically on going after a sector that you have the assets that support it. And remember, we're not looking at the assets strictly in your community, but regionally. You're much stronger regionally than you are as a single community. Once we've identified a particular sector, one key point that I really think is important is we don't think we know everything. We actually try to go to some representative or knowledge base of that sector and find out how they view us. So you now have your asset inventory, you've identified the sector, you think it's a good place for you to go to get an investment from, but what does the sector think? And very often what we get from information from this is, this is great, you've got a lot of what we need, but, there's always but, we need a railhead, or we need more industrial park, or we need something to make the whole deal come together. But that shouldn't be looked at in a negative way. Moving towards your strategic plan, this is information you need to competitively compete. So, for instance, if you found out that you needed a new industrial park, that gives you the ability now to identify and look for where funding might come to help make that happen. It also perhaps makes it easier to find the funding if you've got a study done that shows an investing sector actually has identified that as a need. Once we have this all in place, then we look at doing the strategic plan, which is very often what I get asked for first. With this information in hand that you now have, you can now do your strategic plan. You know what you have to offer. You've worked with your stakeholders. Hopefully everybody's on board. You now know the sector you should go after, so you can plan how you might market to that sector, whether it's trade show events like this, or direct cold calls, or working with some of the other ministries overseas. You can also plan on how you're going to overcome any of the gaps or challenges that were identified in your gap analysis. So that would be the Tier 1. The Tier 2 of our program would then move on after you've got all your ducks in line, so to speak, and help you with projects such as bringing investors into your community. We have a project that I didn't invent. It was invented one of our clients, but I think the terminology was ambassador training, where we take everybody in a community and put them together and make sure everybody's singing from the same song page before we bring the investor in, so there's no arguments internally when the investor's there. So that's what we try to do, and the program that supports that, as I said earlier, is the NCR program. And the program will support up to 75% of eligible costs for any of these aspects I just spoke of, and anything else. Really, the tripwire for us is if you have an activity that's going to do one of two things: increase the potential of your community to attract an investment or make an investment happen, or result in you becoming more investment ready, we'll seriously look at the project. We've done about 360 projects over the last 8 years. About $3.6 million, I think, we've put into it overall. So we'll cover up to 75% of eligible costs. You can get up to $10,000 per applicant per application. So if you have a number of applications in a year, you can gain that $10,000. If you're working regionally, you can stack the funding. So if 3 communities came together, let's say, on a single regional project, you could then get up to 75% of eligible costs to a maximum of $30,000 in that project. We can also work with some of our other partners. The CFDCs used to be a good partner with us, so we will fund 75%. You could look for 15% from another funding agency, but we insist that you need 10% equity in the game. So a community could actually get themselves down to 10% equity with this program. Our groups of eligible applicants is very small. We work with all municipalities, First Nations, economic development corporations, and some umbrella groups such as FedNor, NOMA, and EDCO, which are umbrella groups of communities. And of course, any partnerships of the above as well. And that's all I have. My contact information for this program, we are on the MNDM's website as well, but it would work just as well. Feel free to give me a call or drop me an email. I'd be happy to talk to you at any time. We also have officers in all your communities, so you have your Northern Development officers located throughout the North. They know the program well and can work with you as well. Thank you. What's that? Just ask for questions. So this is the end of the 3 presentations, so at this time I'll ask if anybody in the audience has questions for any one of the 3 speakers. Yes, ma'am.
Mary Marlin, I'm a councillor with the municipality of Mines-NCIR.
Yes.
Okay, so we've been really successful in getting a lot of funding from all the groups. So now we have a lot of our information built up about our assets. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. We have a lot of information now built up about our assets. So how do we maintain that? So it's up to date, this 90 days, like, is the expectation that you will hire somebody and that will be their permanent job then, to make sure that that's up to date? That's kind of one part of it. And the other part is that, like, we have a Community Futures, GEDC as well. They're also maintaining databases that have similar information. Is there opportunities for a municipality to partner with like a GEDC to have one place where people went for all the information, so that you're not maintaining it in 2 places? Because it's such a big job, the maintaining it.
Absolutely. I'll answer this just because Greenstone has done a lot of NCR projects over the years, for the past 8 years, and we work both with the GEDC and we worked with the municipality. To answer your first question, whoever maintaining the information should be, whether you assign that to a certain individual or it's just done. It's not a big job, I think, if you do it on a regular basis, whether it's when something changes, when you have a new number change, or you want to update your, some commercial land has sold or more has come on the market. I think you just update it on a regular basis. If a community gets into that process of understanding what is in their asset inventory on their community profile and updating it on a regular basis, I don't think it's an onerous job. It is if you wait 6 months and you try to update it all at once. And we've seen a lot of, and there is a challenge. I will admit there is a challenge. Some communities have interns that work on that at times. But I would say that if you do that on a regular basis and someone has the knowledge that profile exists and becomes part of their monthly job, I think that would be the way to handle that. But it is very important to keep it updated, of course, because you don't want an investor come in for a specific property, let's say, and then it's gone, right? It went 6 months ago. In regards to working where that would go, we used to have a site, the Ontario Investment Trade Service site, where we used to put profiles and we marketed globally. Oh, sorry, should never give me a microphone. And that site, unfortunately, it was kept up by the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade, and they've since shut that down just this year. We've been scrambling to see if we could find another site for communities where they could post that. I know some of the First Nations I'm working with now are aggregating all the information and putting it on tribal council websites, so sort of a regional thing. Absolutely, if your CFDC has a website where they post that stuff and that's where you want to locate it, that's fine with us. I guess it all depends on the relationship between the CFDC and the community, how you want to do that. Most communities will keep it on their website regardless. If they've got it, you could have it posted in multiple locations as well. And again, I don't know if Mike, maybe, is there a federal government site for?
I did want to offer one thing, though. Clearly, in today's world, keeping your website current needs to be recognized as a priority on a community-wide basis. So particularly because if you get a call from someone who, in essence, checked out your website, you can pretty much be guaranteed that you've been looked at about 20 or 30 times more. So in essence, you never hear from all the people that look at you. So the work that you've done to a great degree will go for naught if you're not updating that, to make sure on 2 fronts. One, that they know that you know that having it up to date is an important part of site selection, every new attribute, every different capacity. They also want to know basically that communities can pull together the various stakeholders and come up with one element that creates a level of collaborative, call it information management. If it's by link or a single site, whatever it is, that would be an important part of a community or regional strategy to ensure that you're getting the right kind of attention, both from investors and from potentially companies looking at locating. They want to know what you know, and they want to be able to make use of what you provide them by way of good information to make informed decisions. So we don't have, as a federal function, a mechanism that facilitates that, but we're certainly aware of what the impact values are.
Another suggestion might be, if some of the umbrella groups for municipalities, the FNOMs, the NOMAs, the EDCOs, perhaps the discussion could be made, to have a central site for that. I don't want to promise for them, but or even regional, if you work regionally. But you're quite right. It's not a large challenge keeping it updated, but the higher profile you get for your profiles, the better. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Okay. Was there any other questions in the room for any of the speakers here today? Vicki, how are you?
Hi. I just, for the rest of the room, I think it's really important because Greenstone has an excellent tool. It's called a profile generator. And we picked on this profile generator. It costs a couple $1,000s a year, and every year our information is data mined and uploaded, and it takes a week. So that's available, that tool's available. And actually, the gentleman here is who I work with, Eric McSweeney. So, but it's awesome. So time consumption is like, on those data isn't a lot of time. The time is, like you said, is when you're getting the attention and spending the time with the companies is where you need the labor.
Great. Thank you. So everybody can swamp Greenstone's website right after the session here and have a look at that. So there's one example for you. That's another key point when we're working together in Northern Ontario is network with a lot of your other EDOs and communities. Some of them have great ideas and great products, and you can get some best practices there. Thank you, Vicki. Anybody else? A question for the group? No? Well, thank you very much for having us, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.